Today I'm going to be reflecting upon what I've learned in GHS Latin American contact zones and how it's really influenced me. I've really learned a lot throughout this class, and I came into this class knowing really absolutely nothing about the culture except what I've learned in my prior Spanish classes. And this has really made a huge impact on the way that I see Latin America. I think that now it's really shifted my thinking from seeing Latin America as a lot of like poor countries, just all kind of put together, and more as developing countries that have had a long struggle throughout time and history. And really, they're kind of newer countries in development still, compared to, America and where we are. And I don't think that I make now as such of a comparison to, oh, we should be on the same level, or they should be on the same level as us as a nation, that their nation should be. And I kind of want to go over, starting with the colonial period. The Maya, the Aztec, and the Inca were conquered by the Spanish and the Portuguese. And you see still a lot of, mainly, Spanish and Portuguese influence in Latin America. You see them speaking Spanish, which a lot of the indigenous people were forced to learn how to speak in Latin America. You see Catholicism being the main religion in Latin America. And they were forced to, not have their own cultures taught to their children, but their children were taught Catholicism at this time when the Spanish and Portuguese were conquering them. There's really a blend of European and Spanish culture, but you also see African culture. Some areas, there's different dialects of Spanish, and some areas speak almost an Afro-Spanish language. And this is because so many Africans were brought over from Africa that they made up a pretty good chunk of the population as slave labor. And a lot of their culture is transitioned into, Spanish festivals, Spanish traditions, and even their language. Now, I want to talk about the independence movement when they kicked out the Spanish and Portuguese, Latin America did. And so they really gained this independence because of the ideas during the Enlightenment period. They saw American independence, then they saw, French gain independence, and this really brought a sense of nationalism to them for their own home. And that's when they revolted against the Spanish and the Portuguese, and the Spanish and Portuguese simply could not fight a war after Napoleon had already gone to war with Spain. They just could not afford to do this war and win it. So they retreated, and Spain and Latin America became a free region. Now, in the 20th century, we see a large building of their nationalism in art and literature. You see people like Diego Rivera and Frida gaining really national know-how about their art. Like, everyone wanted to see it, and in their art you can see a mix of Spanish culture, Latin American culture, African culture, all kind of blending together in their art. There's many political movements at this time. They were trying to figure out who was going to really lead Latin America, if a dictatorship should be put in place. A lot of countries kind of went that way, but it didn't last very long because the people wanted a democratic republic where they could vote people in. And that's what it is today. And what happened is they kind of split the region up into a bunch of different countries. And there was a big fight over resources and who was going to have access to certain resources. But after, lots of different revolutions and battles, the land was split pretty evenly throughout. Not really evenly, because of Mexico and Brazil take up a large portion, and Chile takes up the whole long strip. But it was still, split up pretty evenly with resources and everything. And throughout this time, they elected presidents and people that were going to be put in power, and still do elect presidents today. Now, economically, some countries struggle more than others in Latin America, and that's really just because of the history where countries have came in and really stripped them of their resources. Big corporations force extractivism upon the countries and mine them, keep the people poor while they're making billions of dollars. Um, Now, you also see really that for the future of Latin America, that there's going to still be struggles because these corporations keep coming in and forcing mining upon the people. They push indigenous people out of their own communities so that they can extract resources out of Latin America without the people's approval. So you see a lot of protests happening still today, a lot of social movements and activism about really just basic human rights in the area and water rights. You know, they even take their water. So it's interesting how they've been a contact zone over all these years and how they'll continue to be a contact zone that will just be a mix of diverse cultures and languages and all the history that really impacted it. And part of me kind of feels bad about what they've went through, but also part of me is impressed of everything they've went through, and they've still became a region of really flourishing countries and developing countries still today.